Hello and welcome to Powerful Nothing, a Magic the Gathering podcast. I'm your host Daniel, otherwise known on the internet as Too Sweet MTG, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host James. How's it going, dude?
Yeah, it's going pretty good, man. It's going pretty good. Been drafting a bunch of Lord of the Rings, but also got some time to have a look at it in Constructed. So yeah, and it's definitely got some good stuff going on.
Yeah, definitely. That tees us up quite nicely, because today we're going to be looking at how some of the new cards from Lord of the Rings, Tales in Middle-earth have affected constructed formats. We will have time codes down below in the notes, so you can jump around into your favorite card or jump onto the different sections. Before we get on to our main topic, we have the news of the week. So, first up, Commander Masters previews have almost ended at time of recording. The main set is up. We have a couple of Commander decks left to go. That set looks quite fun. Lots of good reprints. Hopefully these do affect the costs. My fear a little bit with this is that I think the packs are like $10, $12, that kind of thing. Like it is definitely a master set in terms of pricing. So I do hope that enough of it's open to make an impact on prices for everyone. A couple of ones that stand out to me, like Fierce Guardianship. That's one I didn't pick up at the time in the Courier Commander when that one came out. It's a free counter-target non-creature spell if your commander is in play, which is just really good. Free spells are awesome. And the other one that is a bit of a weird one, but I do want to pick this up, if I'm honest, mainly for Cube, is Loyal Retainers. It's 2 and a white for a creature with power and toughness that doesn't really matter, but because its ability is you sacrifice it on your first main phase to return a legendary creature from your graveyard to the battlefield. They started running this in the Vintage Cube recently, and it looked interesting, and it was always wildly expensive, so hopefully now's the time where I can pick one up and it not be wildly expensive. But that does look a bit of fun. James, is there anything you've seen at all? Anything from the set that takes your fancy?
Yeah, I've only looked through quickly, but it looks like there's some cool cards. Bring Slivers back is, I'm sure, will make a very specific subset of the Magic community very happy. Reprinting the Commander lands, the ETB untapped if you control 2 or more opponents' lands seems nice. One thing that really bugged me, a really unnecessary amount actually, was the inclusion of thriving lands at common to play with. I don't know if you ever played with these lands in paper. They're just horrendous. Like you play them and you have to pick a color, and then you have to write down what that color is on a bit of paper and put it on your land. And it's really irritating once you've got a massive board state, as you do in every game of Commander. It's that seemed like a really weird choice to me. But aside from that very, very minor annoyance, the set looks cool.
No, I think that's definitely one because the set, I guess, is made to be drafted. I think that's very much a way of just making 3-4 color decks actually viable. Just the thriving lands, just basically, if you're in one of the colors, you can take them and know that you can splash things quite easily. Is my guess for that.
Nothing wrong with Evolving Wilds. Just saying. Good classic Evolving Wilds.
All good.
But yes, fair point.
Right. Well, so next bit of news: Historic Anthology 7 and Explorer Anthology 3. I think have just come out at time of recording. I think the general consensus is that the historic anthology is pretty good. It does bring in a number of new cards that could be cool in the format on Arena that has everything in it. And the other consensus is that the Explorer one is kind of fine. Like I was speaking with a friend yesterday who was saying that the anthology should, especially for Explorer, if the end result is to get to Pioneer, just print more cards that Pioneer actually wants.
Yeah, 100% agree. Pioneer one kind of baffles me. Like, if you want to make Explorer close enough to Pioneer that you can sort of test Pioneer decks in Explorer, essentially, there's not a lot of cards that need adding, but they've been the same cards for months, and they've released multiple of these anthologies, and they're not there. Specifically the Delve spells and Hidden Strings. By Delve spells mean Dig Through Time and Treasure Cruise primarily. I don't really understand why they haven't added those cards to Arena. They keep saying they want Explorer to be Pioneer at some point. It's really not hard to get there, guys. Give me treasure cruise. I suspect they just think that if they do it really slowly, people will end up spending more wildcards on their stuff.
I'm unfortunately guessing that's probably quite accurate. Yeah, but no, one thing that kind of threw me for one is over both Historic Anthology 7 and Explorer Anthology 3, they're bringing into Arena Thespian Sage, Sylvan Scrying, and Primeval Titan. So my real question is, when is Dark Depths being printed onto Arena?
Yeah, that sounds sweet. Get a hex page. I mean, the Thespian stage is quite impactful on Pioneer, actually, because it's a key piece in Lotus Field.
That makes more sense, yes.
Yeah, you Thespian stage your Lotus Field, and it's very effective. But yeah, we're still missing Hidden Strings, I believe, for that deck in Explorer. Yeah, cards on the table. I've not really played a lot of Explorer. I'm basically waiting for it to become Pioneer, and then I can play Pioneer on Arena, which would be way better. But at the moment, I'm stuck playing Pioneer on Magic Online.
Oh dear God, I'm so sorry for you, James.
I know, this is what they're doing to me. They're making me open Magic Online.
Dreadful. Well, hopefully our next topic will cheer you up a little bit. Right, so let's jump into our main topic of the day. We're going to be talking about how the Lord of the Rings cards have affected constructed formats. So primarily, well, firstly, we're going to be focusing on the ones they're actually legal in. So all of these cards from the Lord of the Rings set are legal. Things like Modern, Legacy, Vintage, Alchemy, and Historic. And obviously, the commons will be legal in Pauper. So unfortunately, we're not going to talk about like Standard or Pioneer today. But just the specifically on Historic and Alchemy, just the data for those are a bit harder to come by. So yeah, we'll be primarily focusing on Modern, Legacy, and Vintage, kind of the paper formats, as it were. So I guess, yeah, these cards have been available for a bit under a month now. So let's dive in and see what's been good. So I guess the main place to start here is with the One Ring. It is 4 generic for a legendary artifact. It is indestructible. When the One Ring enters the battlefield, if you cast it, you gain protection from everything until your next turn. At the beginning of your upkeep, you lose 1 life for each burden counter on the One Ring, and you can also tap it to put a burden counter on the One Ring, and then draw a card for each burden counter on it. So James, you probably played with these a bit more than I have. How have you found the One Ring? How does it play in constructed formats?
Yeah, this card's phenomenal. It plays great. The first line of text for gaining protection from everything is way better than it reads for a turn, and the life loss is way less relevant than it reads. Yeah, it's the fact that it's a sorcery speed threat, but it's really hard to kill as an indestructible artifact. Most of the exile removal only targets creatures, so it's pretty hard to interact with it once it's in play. It draws you a phenomenal amount of cards. You can't really sort of grind through the One Ring's amount of cards advantage. It just snowballs so quickly. And given we're talking about Modern and Legacy, there's a lot of ways to turn excess cards into board presence and card advantage without needing to invest very much mana. So yeah, it's once you have that card flow going, it's really hard for your opponent to kill you, and it's very easy for you to turn the corner. And so normally that would be, oh well, you've really got to punish them the turn they tap out for the One Ring, but you can't because they have protection from everything. Especially in Modern, it sort of plays out that that you gain protection from everything reads like, oh, it's a fog, but it actually does a bunch more stuff than that. So, for example, I was playing with Creativity, so Creativity into Archon of Cruelty against the Elementals deck in Modern, which runs 4 copies of the One Ring. And normally the way that matchup plays out is when they tap out for a threat, you deal with threat, you untap, you cast Creativity. They're so low on resources because of the Archon triggers that it doesn't really matter if they kill the Archons. Except this protection from everything fizzles the Archon trigger. So you don't get to punish them, and they have so much card advantage going that just putting 2 Archons into play and not having the triggers, well, they can just deal with the Archons. They're going to draw their Solitudes and whatnot. Yeah, this card's very, very strong. The life loss part matters less than it sort of reads. It's just not hard to build your deck in a way where you have either enough incremental life gain that you can keep this going and live through it fairly comfortably, or just your deck is going to win the game quickly enough that it doesn't matter. Also nice that in Constructed, if you're playing 4 copies of this and you end up with more bird encounters than you would like on your ring and you're worried about the damage, you can just play another 1 ring and legend rule it away. And you kind of get a reset that way. This card plays great.
Yeah, it seems super strong. Like, it is played in so many decks. We'll kind of break down the kind of decks it's played in the different formats at the moment. But just from generally looking over the archetypes and when it goes in, the themes I'm seeing is that it kind of either goes in like multicolored good stuff decks as like a piece of card draw that you know you can always play no matter what lands you get in play. It's also being played a lot in combo decks as a way of keeping yourself alive, and then also allowing you to dig quite quickly for your combo pieces. And then the last type of deck it's kind of seeing playing is ramp decks, so things that kind of ramp it and get into play early and then use the card draw to find other big things that will then win you the game. With those kind of archetypes, I've definitely seen, though, that the more powerful the format is, something in kind of like legacy and vintage here, the more it fits into those kind of categories I've just mentioned, the less powerful the format, your alchemies and your historics, the more it's just being played because it is just a very strong card.
Yeah, for sure. I think, I think certainly the best home for it I've seen in Modern is that 5-color elementals deck. It really lets that pop off because you have the pitch elementals that cost no mana, and Leyline Binding, which costs just 1 mana most of the time, and answer to anything, you can turn those extra cards into board presence really, really quickly. I think a lot of the reason I think it sees a lot more play in Modern is if once you start going back to Legacy, there's a lot more of the combo decks don't really care about that protection ability. Like in Modern, there aren't that many ways to punish you when you tap out for 1 ring, whereas once you go back to Legacy, like they can still Doomsday Fastest Oracle you, for example. They can still take the initiative and do all that stuff. It can be harder to come back. Yeah.
No, exactly. I think let's just stick on Modern for a sec, if that's all right. So, kind of, as you mentioned, the 4-color Omnath kind of multicolored soup deck definitely is seeing a lot of play there. When I was saying kind of the big ramp decks, I was like, it's seeing a lot of play in like mono green Tron, like Amulet Titan, and like even like mono black Cabal Coffers is running it. I'm assuming that's just because it can ramp it out very quickly, and then it's just you have this card advantage engine just in play.
Yeah, for sure. For Tron as well, it's very nice that it is a very powerful card when you have Tron, because you're going to draw into those big threats very quickly, but it's also like pretty castable when you don't have Tron. When someone's disrupted, played a Field of Ruin or a Ghost Quarter or Blood Moon or whatever, and it lets you dig for your answers to that and to let you get back to your Tron lands and making a lot of mana. So yeah, definitely a pretty big upgrade for that deck, I'd say. In terms of Amulet Titan, I think it can cast it pretty quickly, because with these big mana decks, you're making so much mana as well. You can often play this, get protection from stuff. You've drawn 3 cards by the next turn. And you're going to be able to deploy them right away because you're just making so much mana.
Yeah, definitely. Like, actually, I think I even saw like Scape Shift in Modern is running this now.
Yeah, not unreasonable. Lets you dig for more lands that you need or dig for your Scape Shift. Certainly when it first came out, it felt like almost every deck was trying a few copies because it was, it's a colorless card and it started putting up results really quickly. I think it's maybe just settling down a little bit now, but definitely, those homes of Elementals, Titan, Tron, Grinding Station, I quite like it as well. It's very, very strong. There was also quite a while where when it first came out, so the real driver for sort of changing the format, because you don't have that many paper events, it's often Magic Online where you see like the first results with new cards. But there's a real issue with having enough copies of the One Ring on Magic Online for like a few weeks after it came out. So that's sort of meant it took a while to really figure out where it fitted and where it didn't, I think, because people were just physically not able to pay the card. But yeah, that's certainly improving. I think it's still like upwards of 100 ticks, but it is at least attainable. Yeah, but at least the copies do exist now.
Oh my god!
But yeah, for a few weeks after it came out, even the card rental services on Magic Online just couldn't find enough copies.
Well, that's mad. Yeah. I guess it's one of these things with these like limited print run or kind of sets. Like yeah, I know there's something similar with like the Modern Horizon sets. Like I think Ragavan is still. I mean, that's expensive everywhere, but on Mitgo as well, that was way more expensive than in paper for a while.
For sure. I think partly with Lord of the Rings as well, because you can draft the set on Arena, there aren't that many people drafting the set on Magic Online, which
that makes sense.
So less of it's opened, yeah. But yeah, you can at least now rent the card for mana traders on Magic Online, so that's definitely an upgrade. And yeah, the card's really, really good, really impactful to the format.
Nice. Just a couple of other modern decks I just want to run by you just to check how you think they play. So I've seen them in like Saheeli combo decks and like Jeskai Breach, these kind of decks. I'm assuming those are more. This comes down, buys you a turn, and then it's good at digging for your combo pieces. Is that kind of how you've seen it?
Yeah, for sure. It's a nice threat to let you recharge. You know, the Grinding Breach deck actually can make quite a lot of mana pretty quickly between Mox Amber and they'll have like Springleaf Drums and whatnot. So they can get to 4 often on turn 3. And it's really nice late game as well that you can recur it with Emery if they counter it or whatever. But yeah, it's just such a strong card advantage engine, you know. And when you have that specific combo that's quite mana efficient to dig for, that getting the really snowbally card draw going, if your opponent isn't killing you in the meantime, you're gonna find your combo pretty quickly. Yeah, I've seen it in Azorius Control as well. It seems interesting. It's not. I think I don't think you can really just be jamming 4 copies a lot of the time in that deck, but it's definitely quite nice for it kind of replaces, I think, the whether you used to play 5 mana Teferi a lot of the time, but with the very big upside of, well, you can't get killed for a turn in most matchups.
Yeah,
which is certainly pretty big.
No, it makes sense. Yeah, with the control decks, there's one that I could kind of maybe end up seeing it being like a sideboard card, maybe something like that, rather than just a main deck quite constantly.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, the control decks, I guess the life loss can potentially start mattering a little bit at some point, but at that stage, presumably you've drawn so many cards, you do have ways to answer your One Ring if you actually need to. Like you can bounce it with the Mana Teferi or whatever.
No, it makes sense. So before we move on to talk about Legacy a little bit, the One Ring is genuinely being played in so many decks. Do you like? Obviously, it's just come out, and we know they're not going to I think Modern was included in their. There's only going to be so many bans in a year announcement, but how problematic does it need to be before they look at it, do you think?
I mean, it's interesting at the moment. I think right now the format's still very much in flux. I don't think we've seen the final optimal builds of a lot of these decks with the One Ring. And I think in a lot of ways Modern kind of needed that. So I think it has definitely in the short term made the format more interesting and enjoyable, not less. Whether it will still be legal in a year, we'll see. I mean, the fact that it's colorless does make it, it's going in a lot of places.
Yeah, it seems free in a lot of...
Yeah.
In just some decks, it does seem quite like it's a free include because it is colorless.
Yeah, and I think there is a danger it becomes kind of format warping at some point. Like, if your deck doesn't have a good plan against the One Ring, you maybe need to play a different deck. But having said that, you can answer it. Although it is one of the downsides of cards, that even if you have one of those, a good way to remove it from play, which is tough because it's indestructible, but something like Leyline Binding can remove it for 1 mana, but they've still got a card out of it. You're not that happy with that exchange. And so theoretically, and then counter spells are good against it. Delighted Halfling, but which we'll come to later, has something to say about that. But
I didn't even think about that. Okay, yeah.
Generally, counter spells are good against it.
Great. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, let's quickly touch on Legacy because it's definitely like Modern is definitely the format of the One Ring at the moment. Like, yeah, we'll touch on Legacy and Vintage where it is seeing some play, but it's definitely more. It's going in more kind of synergistic style decks than just kind of in decks because it's strong. Is kind of what I've seen. So it's kind of seeing it in what's more kind of like combo decks. So it's in like Mystic Forge combo decks where they're already running big bits of mana and they're running things like Manifold Key that can untap an artifact, so they can quite quickly draw a ton of cards with this. And it's also being run in like I've seen like lists like mono green like Cloud Post. Again, it's a big mana deck that is just generating a lot of colorless mana that lets you cast colorless spells. And again, this just will draw you into your big threats quite quickly.
The Mystic Forge deck looks like an absolute blast to play. It's so if people haven't seen it, Mystic Forge lets you play artifacts from the top of your deck, and the idea is that so many of your artifacts end up being mana positive with the monoliths and the keys to untap them, and then Lion's Eye Diamond and Chrome Mox and the like that you and Lotus Petal, but you end up you'd never run out of mana once you can play off the top of your deck, and then you have to get through lands, because obviously you can't play more than 1 land a turn off the top, but you can obviously tap for Mystic Forge, then untap it with the key, and then you play 4 copies of the artifact where when one of your permanents becomes tapped, you mill a card. So that sort of lets you mill through lands and keep going. Yeah.
Mesmeric Orb, yes, my Commander All-Star in all decks I play.
Yeah, exactly. And then the One Ring obviously played great in that because you can both untap it, as you say, but it also lets you clear the top of your deck once you have the Mystic Forge going. Yeah, so it seems very cool there.
Yeah, that does seem like a lot of fun. Like I think we're definitely like the numbers. Just looking at them it's definitely being played less in Legacy. And yeah, it's kind of like the Mystic Forge combo. It does seem to be the main place. It's seeing some other place in like the multicolored soup decks are everywhere. So yeah, there is like a 4 or 5 color control deck in Legacy that I think is trying. It'll be similar to the Modern one, just with I'm guessing Force of Will and some other cards like that. But yeah, you can see other decks trying it, like Mono Red Prison is giving it a go. Like someone's trying it in Doomsday. Let's go. These all seem like as we kind of said, like it's either big mana or combo to dig to your combo, and it does seem quite good at that.
Yeah, that seems definitely say like more specific homes than in Modern, where it seems like almost every deck has tried it at some point.
Yeah, definitely. And then by the time you get to Vintage, where you have literally everything in Magic available to you, it is like paradoxical outcome style decks that are playing it. James, have you played with those a little bit much? I'm assuming it's a Storm thing, but do you want to?
Yeah, so I think the main place it's to play is the paradoxical outcome coveted jewel Mishra's Workshop deck. So which deck built around Mishra's Workshop, and then you play all the fast mana, and you're trying to land Coveted Jewel, which is a 6 mana artifact where ETBs draw 3, tap to add 3 mana of any color, but when one of your opponents hits you with a creature, they get it. And the idea is you play a Coveted Jewel, you draw your cards, you tap Coveted Jewel to play a Phyrexian Metamorph, you copy the Coveted Jewel, and you keep going. And the one thing's plays great backs. It obviously digs you to pieces and is just phenomenal with Mishra's Workshop. As a way to get it out like on turn 1 pretty frequently with just like 1 Mox in a workshop.
Yeah, that seems pretty scary. Every time I've seen it, like the earlier in just fair magic, the earlier the One Ring comes out, the better it is. And turn 1 is literally as early as you can do it. So that does very much sound like vintage.
Yeah, that's it is a fun format, but don't come if you're going to get mad when your opponent does something bust on turn 1 that you don't get to play Magic, because that does happen quite a lot.
No, exactly. Oh, good. Well, I think let's do this a bit backwards, because we'll touch on historic and alchemy. We won't go into too much detail with these because there isn't, as I said, too much detail available of them. But most of the decks that this is seeing play in, as we'll see with another card, generally have the word mid-range in them. Like I'm looking at the archetype breakdowns on MTG decks, and it's like Rakdos mid-range, Jund mid-range, Grixis mid-range, all this kind of stuff, like control decks as well. So I'm assuming in the lower powered formats, it is just being run everywhere because it's one of the strongest cards and can go in any deck.
Yeah, I mean, if you're playing, a mid-range mirror, for example, where you're just 1-for-1 with each other, if someone lands the One Ring and the other person can't answer it, the game's going to end pretty quickly, right?
Yeah, you're just going to drown them in card advantage, aren't you?
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, that makes sense as a home for it, although I can't claim to know a lot about either historic or alchemy, so might be bang wrong, and maybe there's something else going on that we've missed, but yeah, that would make sense.
If we have missed anything, do let us know in the comments if the podcasting platform you're listening on has a comment section. I need to look at that at some point. But right, so I think that's a good chat about the One Ring. Yeah, it's seeing play a lot of places. There's another card from this set that's also seeing a ton of play, and that's Orcish Bowmasters. It's 1 black for a 1/1 creature orc archer with flash, and when Orcish Bowmasters enter the battlefield, and whenever an opponent draws a card except the first one they draw in each of their draw steps, Orcish Bowmasters deals 1 damage to any target, then amass orcs 1. So this is also seeing play in a bunch of places, again, in both modern and legacy. James, what's your experience with Orcish Bowmasters? Where have you seen it, and how does it kind of play out?
Yeah, I mean, the card play is great. It's obviously the draw punishing effect is the thing that sort of jumps off the page, and but there's a lot of decks in modern, but especially legacy, where people are routinely drawing like multiple extra cards on their turns, and that damage is really going to add up. You're going to get a really big body out of it, and some damage which can either go face or start picking off their creatures. But what's really nice is because you get the effect on ETB as well, the people who don't draw extra cards, a lot of the time they have 1 toughness creatures. And then, if you get it for 2 mana, you get 2 bodies and get to pick off one of their creatures. That's also great at instant speed. So kind of winds up as there's not that many matchups where it's really bad. Also, obviously, plays quite well against the One Ring. I think, definitely more of a defining card in Legacy than Modern, but definitely has found homes in both formats.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. So kind of the way I've kind of compartmentalized this in my head a little bit is this is sort of in a way, the opposite of the One Ring. So for me, the One Ring is stronger comparatively in lower powered formats where the rest of the cards aren't as strong. I think generally Orcish Bowmasters is actually better in more powerful formats where, as you said, people have access to like the card draw where you're going to be getting that pinging damage much more often. So from what I've seen and from people I've spoken to, so in Modern and Historic and Alchemy, it's mainly played in more kind of fairer decks. So just like a very good creature. It answers a 1 toughness things very, very well, obviously. And then when you get to the older formats like Legacy and Vintage, where you have cards like Brainstorm, Ponder, and Preordain, which are all legal in those formats. Actually, one of them might be banned in Vintage randomly now I think about it, but Orcish Bowmasters definitely gets better as it's more likely to reliably ping targets. Also, from speaking with Wifey, who plays a lot of Legacy, who actually check out the Legacy Gambit YouTube channel if you'd like some good Legacy content. There you go. There's a plug, Wifey. We love you. There was definitely a worry before this card came out, after it was spoiled, that 1 toughness creatures would just become unplayable with this, because this just mows them down. It's just the answer to things like Delver and like Baleful Strix, that kind of stuff. But apparently that just hasn't actually been the case. She's actually been really enjoying the Orcish Bowmaster mirrors. It's almost kind of like who blinks first scenario, which she's actually been quite enjoying. So in that respect, it's good that it's a powerful card, but it's not, from the sounds of it, not too unhealthy.
Yeah, I mean, the dynamic of you really don't want to play your Bowmasters, then have them play their Bowmasters and kill your Bowmaster, right? So it's that kind of makes sense.
No, definitely. And so let's actually have a look at some of the decks that it's being run in. So they're similar to the One Ring, and like Historic and Alchemy, it is a lot of decks with the word mid-range next to them again. A lot of kind of just playing good things. So like Rakdos, mid-range. I'm assuming the Historic and Alchemy one is going to be similar to like the Standard and Pioneer decks that we were talking about in our previous episode about Pioneer. I'm assuming this is a lot of the good cards which are being topped up quite nicely with Orcish Bowmasters. In Modern, you see more creature-based decks running it, so like things like Grixis Death Shadow, Yawgmoth Evolution-style decks, and then also Rakdos Scam is playing a lot of this card. And then in Legacy, as we've kind of mentioned, it's more powerful there. It's just kind of, it shows up so much. Like Grixis Delver, like Death Shadow, Bug Scam, Painter, Grindstone, like Reanimator's running it. Actually, Elves is running it, which is wild to me. That does not seem like a sentence I should be saying. But yeah, like Mono Black Helm, Death and Taxes, even like Lórien. And what's interesting about this in Legacy, like from an outsider point of view, is that there's just so many different types of decks on that list that I just read. There's like tempo decks, control decks, combo decks. There's like Taxes style decks. There's so many variety there that they're kind of similarly to, like, I guess the One Ring is that if it's kind of becoming a format defining card, maybe it's something they'll look at some point in the future. But from what I've seen, it's actually kind of, it's bred a lot of kind of cool new decks, or kind of pushed like the Bug Scam deck does actually look quite fun. Like there's a few other cards like that will go into that a bit later on, like some of the cycling cards, which go into that deck as well. And it seems that kind of some printings from the Lord of the Rings have kind of made whole new decks, which does seem quite cool.
Yeah, no, 100%. I not having played loads of it, I played a couple of leagues with a Abzan Lands deck playing Orcish Bowmasters, but it kind of looks like it's had a pretty positive impact on Legacy, actually, because it kind of felt like in Legacy that Delver had basically just been the best deck for quite a long time with only minor interruptions. And this card's really, really good against Delver specifically, because their combination of playing all of the cantrips and a bunch of 1 toughness creatures. So I think just kind of balancing that out a bit is quite nice. And frankly, I think Legacy is better when there's some punishment for just casting Brainstorm, because that card's way too good for that format. You know, it's one of those cards where I think, you know, if Brainstorm had been printed in the last like 10 years, it would be banned in Legacy, right? But but there's a sort of sentimental attachment to the card, and it's seen as like the defining card of the format, so you're not allowed to ban it. So I think having something in the format that actually punishes it pretty hard is probably a positive, honestly.
No, definitely. I do agree with all that. The one thing is that Delver is now running Orcish Bowmasters as well.
Sure.
So,
but it's still, it's going to be better against Delver than against a lot of these other decks, right?
Oh, definitely, yeah. And I'm assuming that maybe the inclusion in Delver is for the Delver mirrors, because, as we said, your Bowmaster answers their Bowmaster, that kind of thing.
Exactly. And then I think you see a pretty similar dynamic in Modern, where it's It's really excellent against the Murktide Regent deck. So that's, again, that combination of they both draw extra cards and have small creatures to pick off. So it kills Ragavan very easily on ETB and a Dragon's Rage Channeler without Delirium. And I think it's really helped the matchup for Rakdos Scam, which is kind of the main sort of tier 1 deck, which plays this card heavily. Just getting to kill those creatures for free, essentially, and then having this card play, which kind of needs answering, because your deck has like a million cantrips. You can't just not cast them. So often how it plays out is it kills a creature on ETB and then eats a removal spell, and that's a lot for 2 mana.
Yeah, and it still leaves you with a 1/1 as well. Like maybe a 2/2 or a 3/3, depending on what's happened in between. Like if you flash this in response to something, it could be, the amass token could be pretty big.
Oh yeah, for sure. And you even get like horrible blowouts where you get, you flash it in response to a cantrip. They have a Dragon's Rage Channeler and a Ragavan, and you get both.
Let's go. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, phenomenal. Yeah. Orcish Bowmasters, it does seem like a really cool card. It's for a card that's being played quite a lot. Seems currently quite healthy, which is actually quite nice.
Yeah, 100%. Even cropped up a little bit in Vintage, in the sort of good stuff Sultai piles. I think it sees quite a lot of play. It's really brutal against, obviously you have a lot of extra cards draw in those formats anyway, but against Bazaar of Baghdad in particular, it really starts adding up.
No!
I hate to do it to you. But,
they could kill your squee in response to your... Oh, no.
Mows down root wallers like nobody's business.
No. Terrible. Okay, yeah. Super strong card. We love it. Right, let's move on to our next card. We're moving on to green. Or moving on to a green card with Delighted Halfling. It's a single green for a 1/2 Halfling citizen. It has tap to add a colorless or tap to add 1 mana of any color. Spend this mana only to cast a legendary spell, and that spell can't be countered. So this is seeing also a ton of play. I think primarily in Modern, if I'm honest with you. But yeah, James, how have you seen this card play out?
Yeah, I don't like playing against this card at all, to be honest. This is just the sort of decks I tend to play. But that uncounterable ability is very, very strong, specifically with, both the 1 ring and the 3 mana Teferi. The curve of Delighted Halfling into turn 2 uncounterable Teferi Time Raveler is quite something. Like when I was just looking at modern deck lists, so like, Focal is playing like 4 1 rings. That's fine. Look at my 4 spell pierces, idiot. What are you gonna do? The answer is they're gonna play turn 1 Delighted Halfling, and I'm gonna be really sad about it. But card's really strong, to be honest. It's because those decks are kind of into an accelerant anyway.
Yeah.
But stuff like Birds of Paradise is a bit of a liability at this point in Modern, because there's a lot of stuff. There's stuff that punishes 1 toughness creatures, Ven 6 specifically. But
Delighted Halfling doesn't die to Orcish Bowmasters, which is nice.
Exactly, yeah. That second point of toughness really matters. And then, particularly with Teferi and 1 ring, it's this blanking your counter spells, because they're the only really good ways to answer those cards where you're not getting behind on the exchange. It's very, very strong. It is very impactful for quite a few matchups, I think.
No, definitely. Yeah, it's seeing play in a fair number of decks in Modern. Yeah, we can come and touch on some. Yeah, the 4-color Omnath piles, like it's a Healy combo. This lets you cast just a Healy without being countered. Apparently, it's been running Samwise combo, which James will be explaining to me in greater detail, because this was very new to me until we started putting the show notes together. It's even been running in some 2-color decks as well. I'm assuming in those spots it's more for the uncounterable text. So it's being run in Yawgmoth decks, so you can't counter the Yawgmoth. It's even being run in Heliod combo decks, again, because part of your combo is a legendary. Just having something that means it can't be countered is going to be nice in there. And yeah, even an uncountable Ragavan isn't a terrible thing in the world. Yeah, as you mentioned with the One Ring, the fact that it's legendary and not just legendary creature, like, yeah, it means that people can cast their uncountable Fable of the Mirror Breaker, like Grist, even like Minsc and Boo in some older formats. Like even like in Vintage, I've seen people are running this so they can cast their Leovolds or their Narsets or their Okos and they can't be countered. Like that shows it's quite a powerful card.
That's pretty spicy. Yeah. Uncounterable Leo sounds pretty good. It's also quite nice that because the mana bases are so good and so consistent in these formats, when you're casting your non-legendary spells, you don't really get punished for only tapping for colorless that much. So it's kind of a free roll to play this over a different talk, and get that second point of toughness and that uncounterable ability.
Yeah, I generally thought that'd be more of an issue, but I think maybe I'm thinking that more through the eyes of like Commander or like Cube specifically. When I've been looking at these cards, the first time through was for like our Cube set review. But yeah, I guess it's in constructed formats. Yeah, as you said, the mana bases are good enough. Like you have jewels, fetches, and shocks in other formats as well. So yeah, you can make it work, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. The fetch land mana bases are just so consistent, but it's it doesn't wind up mattering a ton. Like obviously, I'll punish you at sometimes. Like if you're sort of multi-spelling with very pip-intensive cards, it would be tricky to make it work. But yeah, in these sort of 3 or 4 color decks, it's you play a lot of Planeswalkers anyway. It's not like you're playing the Planeswalkers because you have the Delighted Halfling. They're just good cards anyway, and this is a really nice way to make them a little bit more resilient to interaction.
No, fantastic. Yeah, love Delighted Halfling. Really, really cool card. All right, let's move on to another card now. We're going to talk about Stern Scolding. This is a single blue for a instant, and it says counter target creature spell with power or toughness 2 or less. So I'm guessing, James, correct me if I'm wrong here, but this seems like a very good sideboard card and a bit of a metagame choice. Like if cards like Ragavan and Orcish Bowmasters are taking over your format, this seems like a very solid way of interacting with those, like especially in like modern historic and alchemy. Is that kind of where you've seen this been run the most and seen it in like some sideboards and stuff?
Yeah, for sure. I think I've definitely seen it crop up in Is It Murktide. I think quite a lot of the thing in Is It Murktide is that it's a 1-mana counter to Solitude in the 4-color matchup.
Oh, good. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's often the real pain point is whether they get to answer your Murktide, and obviously something like Spell Pierce doesn't do it in that spot, but Stern Scolding does. So that's quite a nice one for it. Not like the most impactful card in the world, but definitely like an option to be aware of as a sideboard card if you think the meta calls for it.
No, definitely. Yeah. Seems like a nice flexible card. Yeah, it's one I'm testing out in my cube, and I've only done one. I don't think it got drafted yet, but yeah, I'm interested to see how this does. Basically, see if it is a good enough counterspell as people are mainboarding it and stuff. I guess we'll get onto that in a little bit. Right, moving on to some spells it can definitely not counter. We're going to be talking about Generous Ent and Oliphaunt. We're going to talk about these cycles specifically first. So Generous Ent is 5 and a green for a 5/7 tree folk with reach, and when it enters the battlefield, create a food token, and it has forest cycling for a generic mana. And then Oliphaunt is 5 and a red for a 6/4 elephant with trample, which when it attacks, another target creature you control gets +2/+0 and gains trample until end of turn. And it has mountain cycling for a generic mana. So I'm glad these are seeing play. So these are being played in kind of like modern living end style decks, which want to be cycling stuff into the graveyard so you can living end them all back into play. I'm glad these are the ones that are being played because I think they're cool cards. But why are these being run over other cyclers, James? Are they just bigger?
So the reason for using Living End specifically is that Living End, despite looking like it has looking like a black deck, because it has loads of black cards in it, it's actually in terms of the mana you need to make, it's a Teamer deck.
Right.
Because the cards you actually need to cast are the Cascade cards to cascade into your Living End, and the ones it plays are Shardless Agent because it's just really good. It comes with a creature, and Violent, which is the blue-green one, and Violent Outburst, which is the red-green one, which is very nice because it lets you do it at instant speed. So yeah, it's purely a thing of we need to make Temur mana, and the blue basic land cycler is not a creature, so it doesn't work for Living End. These are really nice fit for that deck specifically. Obviously, the downside of playing something like this normally over just another land is, well, it costs you a mana. It's almost like paying a tap land. But with Living End, literally the only thing it wants to or can do with its mana on the first 2 turns of the game is spend 1 mana, cycle a card, put a big creature in the graveyard. This just gives you more ways to do that over playing lands. Kind of a free roll way to just get really big creatures in your graveyard. It's played things like Striped Riverwinder is normally an include. It's basically just any high impact creature you can put in your graveyard for 1 mana is a consideration if that you can cycle for 1 mana, and these you get to cut lands for rather than cut spells for, which is nice.
Yeah.
I have seen Living End decks that try and play the Troll as the Swamp Cycler, even though they actually have no interest in black mana. They're just doing it to get, you could get a green-black duel, for example, with the upside of, well, Troll pitches to Grief, which these ones don't. But I think the more normal build is, just playing the red and the green ones. It's a pretty meaningful upgrade for a deck. It just reduces the number of draws where you don't draw enough cyclers.
No, that makes sense. Well, talking of the Troll, we are going to talk about the Troll of Khazad-dûm and Lórien Revealed. This is the black and the blue one of the cycle. So Troll of Khazad-dûm is 5 and a black for a 6/5 Troll. It can't be blocked except by 3 or more creatures, and has swamp cycling for a generic. And Lórien Revealed, as we've said, is not a creature. It's 3 blue for a sorcery that says draw 3 cards, and has island cycling for a single generic. So unlike the other two, these are seeing more play in Legacy. As you mentioned, there's still some modern play, but primarily in Legacy, where Troll of Khazad-dûm is being run in decks with Reanimate, basically. So like Bug Scam, as well as obviously the Living End that we've mentioned with the previous ones. But from talking again with the wife who plays a lot of Legacy, the slow fetch of these isn't actually the end of the world. Like she said, has actually been perfectly fine at smoothing out your deck. I'm assuming as well, because it's Legacy, you can also just go and get an untapped dual land and put it into play. So you're not really, you're not paying life for it as well as the 1 mana, that kind of stuff. So yes, sticking Troll of Khazad-dûm into your bin and then reanimating it back on turn 2 seems like it. Apparently that is still good enough. Like that is a perfectly fine way of playing Legacy. And as you mentioned, it does pitch to Grief as well. With Lórien Revealed, that is also seeing play again for the smoothing, but also importantly, it also pitches to Force of Will, which is always a thing that needs to be considered in Legacy.
Yeah, 100%. Lands for pitch to Force of Will sound pretty good. Obviously, you can't play. You can essentially think about these as tap lands, right? And you can't play a ton of tap lands, but a tap land that puts a 6/5 in your graveyard to be reanimated later, perfectly reasonable card. The reanimate Troll thing is interesting because reanimate specifically over the other animation spells is actually like, you don't need to be a reanimator deck. You don't need to be reanimating Gristlebrand because it's just so efficient. But paying 1 mana and putting a 6/5 into play, totally good card. It's sort of analogous to the Death Shadow decks in Legacy. At some point, we're playing Reanimate to either get back their Death Shadows later, or because they were playing Street Wraith anyway, to just cycle and reduce their life total. Like the turn 1 of cycle Street Wraith, reanimate the Street Wraith. I have a 3/4 Swamp Walk on turn 1, also perfectly fine. This kind of does the same thing.
No, phenomenal. Yeah. I'm glad that it's very cool to see that kind of commons from a set can be making a wide range of impacts in different formats. I guess one thing to probably touch on is that these are also seeing pauper play. They are commons. They're seeing pauper play. I think so. Lórien Revealed is seeing some play in kind of like the Tolarian Terror style decks. So Clarion Terror is like a 7-mana 5/5 that costs 1 less for each instant and sorcery in your graveyard. So Lórien Revealed is very good in that because it puts itself into the graveyard. And then just specifically because with all these land cycling, because it nowhere does it say the word you need to get a basic, so you can get jewels. And Pauper does have jewel lands nowadays. It's 2023. They have like snow jewels from Kaldheim, which come into play tapped, but are perfectly good at fixing your mana if you're being a bit greedy in something like Pauper. So yeah, it's good to see that these cards are being played not only in Pauper, but in every format as well.
Yeah, 100%. The other nice thing they do in Pauper is, so Pauper is a format where Brainstorm is legal, but it can be quite hard to enable it because you don't have the fetch lands like you do in other formats. You don't have those shuffle effects. So unless you have other ways to shuffle your deck, you end up just getting Brainstorm blocked. You put your 2 bad cards back and then you have to draw them the next 2 turns. That's a lot less good. Whereas these are quite a low-cost way to get that shuffle effect into your deck. And the Lórien Revealed especially, I think the blue mirrors in Pauper can definitely go quite long, where both decks have a lot of counter spells. It's totally reasonable to get up to 5 at some point during those games and just cast your Lórien Revealed and draw 3 cards.
No, that does seem strong. And yeah, I'll be honest, completely forgot Brainstorm was legal in Pauper. That's wild. Yeah. Let's go. Okay. Right. The next card we're going to move on to, apparently this is a combo card, and James is going to be doing a lot of the talking for this one, but we're going to be looking at Samwise Gamgee. It is a green and a white for a 2/2 legendary creature halfling peasant. Whenever another non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, create a food token. And you can sacrifice 3 foods to return target historic card from your graveyard to your hand. So, James, I'm going to swiftly throw this over to you. Does this combo with that weird tree thing?
With Scurry Oak, I believe there is a combo there, yes. The one that's been really impactful in Modern, though, actually, or I say really impactful, has seen a decent chunk of play, is the combo with Cauldron Familiar.
Right,
That's
okay.
the black for a 1/1 that drains on ETB, and you can sack a food to return it. So if you have Samwise Gamgee, Cauldron Familiar, and any free sack outlet, that's infinite damage, because you play the Cauldron Familiar, you get a food, you sack the Cauldron Familiar, you sack that food to return the Cauldron Familiar. When it ETBs, it makes another food. You sack and drains them for 1. You sack it again, you return it again, you get a food again. You can keep going and kill your opponent that way. And this has seen a decent chunk of play there was already a bit of a food deck in Modern, playing Asmo, which also has some other letters on its name, but I'm not going to try and pronounce it. And it was mostly triggering off like mostly working off artifact ETB triggers with like Oval Chase Daredevil and whatnot, and ways to loot that away. And getting lots of value with that. You can play stuff like Academy Manufacturer in that deck. And this is slotted into that food shell a little bit. I've seen people experimenting with a bunch of ways to do this. I've seen it in like collected company decks as well, trying to do that Cauldron Familiar combo there with like, Cauldron Familiar, Sam, Viscera Seer sort of stuff. Don't know how good it is. It seems really cool. It has put up some results. I think it's definitely one where it seems like there's a million different builds of it going around at the moment, like wildly different, completely different shells. And I think at some point it will probably converge on something and probably be quite good. It's quite nice that you play like Ranger Captain and Vios that can go and get both your familiar and your sack outlets, like Viscera Seer, and it can get Asmo. So that all works quite nicely together. And then you can play like Finale of Devastation or whatnot to go and find your combo pieces. And yeah, because works out as really, really good as a Saga deck as well, because you're just making so many food that your Saga token is going to be pretty huge.
Oh, sweet.
So it sort of gives you a lot of different angles of attack. lot of different ways you can win the game, which is always a good thing. I have no idea how good the deck is at the moment. But I think there is probably a really good build of it somewhere. I think it's definitely one that's still being worked out by the community, what the best way to do this is. But I think there's probably something here, and I think it's pretty cool.
Awesome. That sounds super sweet. We'll have to keep an eye out on that one. As you mentioned, like people were already kind of thinking about this, and Samwise probably pushed it over the edge, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think the Cauldron Familiar combo was sort of new with Samwise. But yeah, that food shell very much already existed, and this kind of just gave it a new angle of attack, if you like. You get to keep a lot of your food singes, and then obviously because Samwise, even when you're not comboing, will just generate a lot of food, so it plays quite well with the rest of the deck as well.
Yeah, I'm just looking through decks online. There's a ton of different lists up here. Like there's some ones like Splashing Blue for like Lonus Cryptozoologist, and running things like Academy Manufacturer as well. Just you can really go ham with your tokens. Yeah, it's like I personally really like. For me, the most exciting part of anything is when new decks are being discovered and like new cool builds. Because basically I don't play too much Modern, but like I do take a lot of influence from constructed formats for things like Cube and even for Commander. So just having new cool things out there is always really interesting.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's a spicy one. I even saw one list running Trail of Crumbs, which people might remember from Standard many years ago. I did not expect that one to be cropping up in Modern, but I'm here for it. It looks great.
No, awesome. All right, so from one Sam to another, we're going to be looking at Samwise the Stouthearted next. It is 1 white for a 2/1 legendary creature halfling peasant with flash, and when Samwise enters the battlefield, choose up to one targeted permanent card in your graveyard that was put there from the battlefield this turn, return it to your hand, and then the ring tempts you. So I'm not 100% sure if this has seen too much play in Modern. Where I've seen it crop up and where I've heard about it is this does actually do some work in Legacy. Like it is just a very good grindy value card. Like at a baseline, it's perfectly fine at getting your fetch lands back, but ideally you're getting your wastelands back so you can kind of keep nerfing your opponent's lands out of the game. And then obviously with Caracas, so you can reset it. We love that. That's very good. And then I've just heard, again, my wife played it on stream recently, just having two Sams, just constantly getting them back is a very good way of getting the ring like fully tempting you, like you max out your ring, which is just like some very good additional value. So yeah. I'm not. I've always liked Sam. I think it's quite cool. Like, have you kind of seen it pop up in Modern at all, James, or any other formats?
I've not seen it in Modern. It's similarly. I think Legacy is the only place I've seen this one come up. I think it does some interesting stuff there. I'm a little bit skeptical that this one winds up being good enough. I don't know if it's a bit like new toys. It's
yes.
And we don't get to play with Red and 6 anymore. Let's play literally anything that can get a wasteland back. But
that does
maybe
track,
I'm wrong. It's a cool card. See if this is one that sticks around.
No, that's cool. No, it makes sense. Right. Moving on to another white card now. We have a couple to run through. We have Forge Anew. This is 2 and a white for an enchantment. When Forge Anew enters the battlefield, return target equipment card from your graveyard to the battlefield. As long as it's your turn, you may activate equip abilities anytime you could cast an instant. And lastly, and I think most importantly for Modern, you may pay 0 rather than pay the equip cost of the first equip ability you activate during each of your turns. So I'm assuming there's one big place where this is being played, James. Do you want to talk to us about this in like Hammer Time?
Yes. So this is, in a lot of ways, this does everything Hammer Time wants to do, right? You're already playing your Sigarda's Aids and whatnot to give you that equip for 0 on your Colossal Hammers. But getting to do it at instant speed is really, really scary to play against. It makes it very hard to just like kill the creatures that the hammer's on because they just move it somewhere else. And when you line up blocks, you can either move it at instant speed to an unblocked creature to kill them, or if you don't have lethal, you can move it to a creature they blocked to win the combat. Having said that, it's a 3-mana card, and Hammer Time is generally not too into that. It's a very low curve deck, and the majority of the extra mana it has, it wants to use activating Urza's Saga. So generally, it ends up being like a one-off, but it's really nice if you have to go long, people are killing your hammers and whatnot, getting those back, being much better against the the lightning bolts of the world, and people trying to kill your creatures in combat to not get hit by the hammer. This kind of next levels that, which is pretty nice. Yeah, you can't play a ton of them, but it does some good stuff for sure.
No, definitely. Yeah, it seems like from what you're describing, it sounds very much just like a one or two of like silver bullet, basically. Like maybe you don't necessarily want to see it in your opening hand, but you'll perfectly fine. Like if the game's going a bit longer, it just resets you and gives you that little push you need to put that to get you over the edge. If they've already answered your equipment or something like that, get it back, go again.
Yeah, exactly. Good for killing your equipment, or one of the other common ways you'll try and deal with Colossal Hammer is you try and kill everything that cheats the equip cost. If you answer the Skada's Aid of the Paladin, then their Colossal Hammers don't do anything, and this is another. Yeah, just having that bit of redundancy there is quite nice. But it can, I think, be a bit of a liability against if you're just needing to race another really quick for active deck. This is a little bit clunky.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of wild that a 3-mana spell is too expensive for Modern, but I guess it needs all the other bits as well around it. It's not just a 3-drop, if that makes sense.
Exactly, yeah. It's not a 3-drop that does anything by itself, right?
No, all good. Right, we have one more white card, I think. Let's talk about Reprieve. So this is a 1 white for an instant to return target spell to its owner's hand, and you draw a card. So from what I've seen, this is actually mainly seeing play in like Historic and Alchemy, just according to raw numbers that I can see. And I'm assuming for a lot of like white or white X decks, that's mainly because it's just one of the best bits of interaction that they have available to them. Because I don't think there's like Path to Exile or Swords to obviously not Swords to Plowshares in those formats. But how's it looking like in Modern, James? I think it's seeing play in some like 4-color decks as a solid option. But where are you seeing it land?
Yeah, so I've seen it crop up in the 5-color Zoo deck, which is, despite being a 5-color deck, is actually an aggro deck. It's trying to utilize the domain creatures, basically. It wants to get one of each basic land type into play and maximize its Wildner Castles and the like, and play leyline bindings and whatnot to get stuff out of the way. It's a cool deck, actually. It's a nice, like, it looks like an aggro deck, but it actually has some pretty good disruption as well. Plays like Scion of Draco is a really good threat, which is like 12 mana 4/4, but it costs 2 less for each basic land type you control. It's cropped up there. I think it's like fine. There's a 1 or 2 of. It's a metagame call. It's really good when you're retrieving expensive stuff. But the thing is, Modern there's a lot of decks where most of a deck is like 1 and 2 drops, and retrieving those is just not exciting. So yeah, I don't think you're going to play a ton of them. It'll crop up from time to time, not the most impactful card in that format, I don't think.
No, that makes sense. Yeah, I think one of the reasons why it's seeing, I guess, playing like Historic and is because like there is like a mono white aggro deck.
Yeah, that makes total sense.
Or in Alchemy, I think it's the solid white weenie deck. But yeah, it's just this is where that card will absolutely thrive.
Yeah, 100%. Because it does something really unique for those decks, right? Whereas, if you were a deck that plays blue, for example, this isn't, it is a little bit better than Remand, actually, because it doesn't say counter the spell, it beats uncounterable stuff, which is quite nice. And with Delighted Halfling in the format, that actually does matter a bit.
That's true, yeah.
But it's not a huge upgrade over Remand, and people weren't playing very many Remands previously. But yeah, I could certainly see it being a lot more impactful in formats which that really streamlined White Weenie deck. It's just a way to stop your opponent stabilizing for one more turn.
No, fantastic. Makes sense. Right, so moving on now, we have Sauron's Ransom. This is 1 blue and a black for an instant. Choose an opponent. They look at the top 4 cards of your library and separate them into a face-down pile and a face-up pile. Put one of the piles into your hand and the other into your graveyard, and then the ring tempts you. So, from what I have seen, this is primarily seeing play in Legacy. It's kind of a cheaper mini Factor fiction that also still pitches to Force of Will. It's being run in a lot of decks with things like Orcish Bowmasters and Baleful Strixes, which are pretty solid ring bearers. So the ring tempting you part actually does something. And obviously also being run in things like Delver and Death Shadow. If those can't, like if Delver's already going into Grixis, then it's looking at running, and then it can cast Black Spell, so it can cast a Sauron's Ransom. It's less play in other formats, and I'm assuming that's kind of because Legacy has more impactful, cheap, good creatures, so it gets more value out of the actual ring temptation part. But if it stays solid, I think other formats might pick it up. Like, have you seen it being played in much, James?
So I've seen it crop up in Modern a bit. There's been some like Dimir control decks putting up some results which have a couple of copies of this card. Yeah, it's just nice, efficient card draw. There's actually like not that many great options for card draw at 3 mana. In Modern, it's kind of this or Archmage's Charm, but that requires like triple blue. So yeah, I can see playing a couple of them. It's an instant, so you can hold up all your counters, and if they don't do anything, you can play this end of turn. It's a nice little value card for sure. It also seems pretty meaningful in Legacy that this is card draw that doesn't trigger Orcish Bowmasters.
Oh, that's right. Yes, because it's revealed, and then you put them into your hand, and that's and also graveyard. Yeah. You aren't drawing anything.
Yeah, exactly. Which definitely the amount of Orcish Bowmasters being played.
Yep.
That I think that matters.
Yep. Okay, Sauron's Ransom now a staple. Cool, confirmed. Love that. Right. All right, should we move on to our last card of the day? We have another. We're going back to white, and we're going back to another comboing halfling. Next, we have Rosie Cotton of South Lane. This is 2 and a white for a 1/1 legendary creature halfling peasant. When Rosie Cotton of South Lane enters the battlefield, create a food token, and then whenever you create a token, put a +1 counter on target creature you control other than Rosie. So this is another combo card that is importantly, I believe, is legal in Historic and Alchemy. So that could be quite fun. It is legal in Modern as well. But yeah, Historic and Alchemy, this could be where this sees a bit of play. James, do you want to talk us through the combo?
Yeah, so sort of a primary combo with this, certainly in those historic formats, I think, is Rosie Cotton with Scurry Oak. So Scurry Oak is 3 mana for a 1/2 evolve. We don't care about the evolve that much, but it also has whenever one or more +1/+1 counters are put on Scurry Oak, you may create a 1/1 green squirrel token. So if you play Rosie Cotton, you put that counter on Scurry Oak, that creates a squirrel token, that triggers Rosie Cotton again, put that counter on Scurry Oak again, continue until you get bored. And obviously, you're getting an infinitely large Scurry Oak and as many tokens as you want. It's a good combo. It's the issue I can see with it is that unless they don't have any blockers for Scurry Oak, you're not necessarily killing them that turn. You can, because the tokens don't have haste. You're not attacking with them until the next turn. So you do your combo thing. They trump block your Scurry Oak. You pass. They now have a turn to kill you or wipe the board or whatever. But it's really nice that this is a combo you can Collected Company into. All for ways to make that card playable. And unlike something like Devoted Druid combo, you don't have to wait for your creatures to not be summoning sick for the combo to work. It just works right away as soon as they hit play. So I've seen it in Modern a little bit as well, in the sort of another combo to put in the Collected Company Heliod Walking Ballista combo deck. So that combo works by making infinitely big Walking Ballista with triggers from Heliod's Suncrown. And yeah, it sort of just gives you another combo to Collected Company into, and you're also playing Eldamri's Calls, so if you draw one half of either combo, you can pretty reliably go and find the other half.
It's like, sorry, those combos don't overlap at all, do they? It is just a separate creature-based combo that you are running in your deck. Is that right?
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
Okay, cool. Love that.
I guess it's kind of cute that if you have a Walking Ballista, you do your Scurry Oak thing. Oh, so if you have a Heliod and you do your Scurry Oak thing, but you can't kill them because they have a blocker immediately, you at least get to gain infinite life because you can activate Heliod and give it lifelink.
Okay.
But yes, they don't massively overlap as far as I could see. But yeah, you just spin the wheel with Collected Company, I think, and hope that you hit,
cool. No,
you
I
hit
like
two
that.
parts of one combo rather than one part of each.
No, to be fair, I actually quite like that. That's quite cool. And yeah, obviously the thing with Collected Company is you can do it on their end step, and in theory you can flip over your combo and then you untap and swing through with everything, which is quite fun. And I didn't realize that also Collected Company is historic legal, which is quite spicy. It's somehow not alchemy legal, but yeah, I'm assuming people could be jamming this on Arena pretty soon.
Yeah, for sure. I think there was already a combo people used to play with Scurry Oak in historic, and I don't remember exactly what the other piece was, but I think it was maybe more expensive than Rosie. I think Rosie is just like an upgrade for that deck, which seems quite nice.
No, phenomenal. Love that. Cool. So those are a bunch of the cards that are seeing playing in constructed formats. There are definitely more out there. Like, there's definitely some other cards that are seeing a bit more fringe play, things like Relic of Sauron in Vintage or Fourth Air Lingus in Legacy. But these are the cards that kind of we've seen put up like decent numbers in decks. And because this is probably going to be our last chance to talk about Lord of the Rings before we start moving on, because the never-ending wave of spoilers will always continue, this seems like a good time to actually talk about the limited format a little bit. And I know you, James, you've been playing a ton of it, and I think you've been enjoying yourself from the sounds of it. But yeah, what's your thoughts of the format?
Yeah, it plays really, really well, actually. It's the gameplay is really, really interesting. The ring tempting mechanic specifically, I think, is great for limited. It really makes you plan plan a few turns ahead in terms of what you're choosing to tempt, and it makes the draft quite interesting as well because it means your pick orders are very changeable, because you need the right combination of tempt cards and good things to tempt onto. And because the tempt cards are, if you have a few tempt cards, they're not great. If you have a lot of tempt cards, they get a lot better. Partly because the way the ring tempting works, basically the second and fourth stages both really matter, and the first and third aren't that strong. So the first is just an evasion ability, but the second lets you loot on attacks, and the fourth one deals them damage. So it means that during the draft, you're really trying to piece together all the right pieces, and it means that you can have very different looking decks with very different game plans within the same color combination. It's not that sort of very linear thing we've seen in some other formats where you're basically just like, oh, I'm green-white, I'm doing this thing, this is my pick order, and it doesn't really change for a draft. You've really got to be conscious of what your deck is trying to do, and different decks can have very different plans within the same color combination. The colors are not balanced, like really at all. But that's kind of okay, it turns out. Black's very, very good. Blue's pretty good. Red's good. Blue's good. White's fine. Green is kind of really, really bad. but it's not so bad that if no one else is drafting it, you can't have a good deck. And it does let you splash quite well. And there's kind of some nice little sub-archetypes going on as well. There's some really cool multicolor stuff you can do, specifically with Great Hall of the Citadel, which is a land at common where you can either tap it for a colorless or pay 1 and tap it to add 2 mana of any combination of colors, but you can only spend them on legends. It's not a great card in most decks, but if you can get like 3 of them, you can then kind of just splash any legend you want to.
Sick. Okay.
Yeah, so you can do some pretty cool stuff where you're just like, oh yeah, I'm this like Orzhov deck, but I have 3 Great Halls of the Citadel, and like look at my team of legend, you know? And because it's it's untapped, it works early. You can even like play some of the cheap ones. It lets you do some pretty cool stuff. So if that's open, you can do some pretty spicy stuff there. I had a nice black-white deck playing Sauron, Grixis Sauron. That was pretty good.
Oh, you actually got to play the Sauron. Sweet.
Yeah. No, the format's cool. It plays really well. I'm enjoying it. I think there's quite a lot of depth to it. The spell synergies all work really well as well. The sort of Grixis, but a lot of it's blue-red based. Like paying you, for instance, sorceries. Those payoffs work pretty well. There's also sort of weirdly another 5-color deck you can draft there with if you get enough of the Pelargir Survivors, which is the 1/3 taps for a mana of any color, use it only to play instants and sorceries. That card's, if you get a bunch of them, you can kind of just start splashing a bunch of off-color instants and sorceries as well, which is quite nice. And that card's actually kind of great anyway, because 1/3 is a weirdly good stat line in this format, because it gets to block ring bearers really well.
And is probably a very good ring bearer itself as well, I'm guessing.
Exactly, yeah. So yeah, the format's got quite a lot going on. I'd recommend giving it a try if you haven't yet.
No, fantastic. And for those who are enjoying it a bunch, last week on the YouTube channel, we put out a guide on building a set cube, actually, for Lord of the Rings Tales in Middle-earth. So, yeah, if you like this set so much you want to play it forever or have access to it forever, that might be something worth checking out.
Spicy. I like it.
Got to get the plugs in, James. It's very important to get the plugs in.
Look at that synergy.
Yeah. Cool. Right, that brings us on to our last topic of the day. What have we been playing? So if you don't mind, I'll jump off. So the most recent bit of Magic I played was we did a cube draft recently, and I'm very pleased to announce to everyone that I am once again the reigning, defending, undisputed cube champion. You're all welcome. You're all welcome. Yeah, no, it was a lot of fun. This is the 3rd cube in a row that the Artifact aggro deck has actually won. I think mine was definitely the most aggro of all the versions. Like, it was curved out with good, aggressive Artifact creatures, while also having like a Mishra's Workshop and a Tolarian Academy in it. If I'm honest, I think those two might be the key powerful cards to why the deck did a lot of things. But yeah, with Mishra's Workshop and Tolarian Academy, I had like more mana than God. It was a pretty scary deck. It was base red-black, splashing white for 4th Aerlingus, which did effectively win me 2 games out of nowhere. But if I'm honest, like one of the biggest cards I was really impressed by was Scorpeth Lord. That's 2 and a black for a 3/2 Necron Noble with Menace. And it gives other artifact creatures you control +1/+0 in Menace, and it has Unearth for 2 and a black. Like, that card combined with things like Eyesight Golem and like Patrick Automaton, you just do so much damage so quickly. And then you have a ton of mana to pump into like your Walking Ballistas, or you can really easily cast like your Chaos Defilers. It was a very cool and very scary deck.
Yeah, no, it looked really strong. I think people need to get used to, and by people I include myself, drafting this cube, to the fact that this artifact aggro deck's actually just very strong and should be taking the pieces pretty highly. I think I've definitely seen like Workshop and Academy go around pretty late in a few drafts, and I think that probably won't be happening too much once given it's run 3 in a row. I think you might have to fight for those cards a little bit more, but yeah, the deck definitely looked good. I think, it probably takes people a while to catch on to it, partly because a lot of the cards it's using are not like the traditionally really strong cube cards that everyone's used to. Like you said, Scorpeth Lord, I had no idea what that card did, to be honest. But yeah, it sounds pretty good. And yeah, the deck definitely does a lot of scary things.
No, definitely. It's as I mentioned, it's that this build of deck has won the last 3. I think mine was definitely the most aggressive of these. Like previous ones had like a tinker and that kind of stuff, so they had a bit more splashy top end. But no, mine was just very curve out. One thing I'm thinking of doing, and like I'm not sure if this is the correct way to do it, to balance it out, I'm adding more artifact cards, but I'm going to add some in white. Like I'm thinking of adding like Ingenious Smith and Dig Site Engineer, so it means that it is incentivizing 2 different people to be in it effectively. So it's not just one person getting all the cards. You have to kind of fight for them a bit more, I think, is what is the better way of balancing out rather than just taking some cards out. But I think that could be fun.
Oh yeah, no, that makes sense. And I think, it will kind of, draft is self-correcting, right? Once people start taking these cards a bit higher, it will be harder to get a really good version of the deck.
No, definitely. No, exactly. How about yourself, James?
Yeah, so also enjoyed that cube draft. I thought my deck was great. I had a blue-black deck with Fast Oracle Consult combo, a bunch of good interaction, and some like wheels and like Hull Breacher. I think I had a Shieldred and like a wheel. The deck played really well, but was just like a little bit short on spot removal and queued into mono white and could not beat like Esper Sentinel and Thalia really. They were close games there. I think the deciding game just needed to find the crucial swamp and couldn't quite get there. But yeah, played that. Been playing a bunch of Lord of the Rings Limited. Also last weekend played a 4-player cube, which was a lot of fun. It's a 4-player Grixis only cube, super powerful, super combo heavy. I had like this really nutty reanimator deck, but was just like the top of my curve of cards I was casting was Frantic Search. That was the only 3-drop. It was all like 1s and 2s, a million tutors, Entomb, Reanimate, Animate Dead. I think I put Gristlebrand into play in every game of the cube. That was a lot of fun. And Sire of Insanity some people as well. That cube's great. I enjoyed that.
Phenomenal. Yeah, I think that's the Ryan Overturf Tubert. I'll put a link to it down in the description below. But yeah, that one is a ton of fun. Yeah, I've seen people play some games with that, and yeah, it has like Time Vault and that kind of stuff in it. Like you can do some very scary stuff in that environment.
Yeah, for sure. You are you come for good games of Magic, not long games of Magic.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. No, fantastic, awesome. Right, I think that brings us to the end of the episode. James, thank you as always for being here, man. Always a pleasure.
No, always good coming on. Yeah, enjoyed it.
Phenomenal. Well, just leaves me to thank you all for watching and listening. Do give us a thumbs up. Is that one you can do? Like, share, subscribe.
It sounds believable.
Yeah, I'd go with that. Yeah. Follow, 5-star, all that good stuff. It'd be greatly appreciated. But until next time, it's goodbye from me, and it's goodbye from James.
Bye, everyone.
And we'll see you all soon. Goodbye.